My mother doesn't want you here." The words cut through the elegant chatter of 200 guests at the grand opening of the Sterling estate. My husband Adrian stood before me in his custom-tailored suit, his face twisted with contempt. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Everyone important in our city had been invited to celebrate his mother's newly renovated mansion. Everyone except me, apparently. I stood there holding the gift I'd carefully selected, a vintage music box that had taken me 3 months to find. Around us, conversations died. Heads turned. I could see Adrian's mother, Beatrice Sterling, watching from across the marble foyer with a satisfied smile on her perfectly made-up face. Instead of tears, I felt something else. Calm, because unlike Adrian, unlike his mother, I knew something they didn't. I smiled. "Thank you for clarifying that, Adrian." His eyes widened slightly. He'd expected tears, shouting, or a dramatic exit. Instead, I placed the wrapped gift on the entrance table and smoothed my dress. "Enjoy your evening," I said pleasantly. Then I walked out. My name is Anne Montgomery. I'm 32 years old, and until that moment at the mansion opening, I had spent 5 years playing the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. I met Adrian Sterling when I was working as an architectural consultant. He was charming, ambitious, and came from one of the wealthiest families in the state. His mother, Beatrice, owned Sterling Properties, a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions. From our first date, I knew Beatrice didn't approve of me. I wasn't from their social circle. My parents were middle-class teachers, not business magnates, but Adrian insisted he loved me despite his mother's disapproval. We married 3 years ago in a ceremony Beatrice tried to cancel twice. She made sure everyone knew I wasn't good enough for her son. Still, I tried. I attended every family function. I volunteered for Beatrice's charity events. I smiled through every insult disguised as advice. Adrian gradually changed. The man who once defended me started agreeing with his mother. He criticized my clothes, my career, even my family. But I stayed, hoping things would improve. They didn't. They got worse. 6 months before the mansion opening, I discovered something that changed everything. I was at Sterling Properties' main office delivering documents Adrian had forgotten at home. His assistant wasn't at her desk, so I walked to his office. The door was slightly open. I heard voices inside. "Mother's right," Adrian was saying. "Anne's become an embarrassment. Her family has nothing. Her career is going nowhere. I should have listened years ago." I recognized the second voice. It was Beatrice. "Finally, you see sense," she replied. "I've already spoken to the lawyers. We'll wait until after the mansion renovation is complete. The opening celebration will be the perfect time. Publicly humiliate her and she'll leave quietly. Too ashamed to fight." My hand froze on the door handle. "What about the prenup?" Adrian asked. "She signed it without reading it properly," Beatrice laughed. "She gets nothing, not the house, not any assets, nothing." I stepped back silently. My heart pounded, but my mind was surprisingly clear. I didn't confront them. I didn't cry in the hallway. Instead, I went home and did something I should have done years ago. I called my uncle. Uncle Wesley wasn't just family. He was one of the most successful real estate developers on the East Coast. He'd offered to help when I married Adrian, but I'd refused, wanting to prove I didn't need family connections. Pride is expensive. "Anne," he said when I called, "it's been too long." "I need your help," I admitted, "and I need your discretion." That afternoon, I sat in his downtown office and explained everything. The years of subtle abuse, Beatrice's contempt, the conversation I'd overheard, the planned public humiliation at the mansion opening. Wesley's expression darkened. "Do you have the prenup?" I nodded, pulling out a copy. He read it carefully, then smiled. "And this document is fascinating." "Fascinating how?" "Did you read Clause 17? I shook my head. Adrian had rushed me through signing it, claiming it was standard paperwork. I'd been too in love to question him. Wesley pointed to a paragraph buried in legal language. This clause states that if either party publicly humiliates the other, the prenup becomes void. All assets become subject to standard marital property laws. My breath caught. So if Adrian publicly humiliates me, you'd be entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. Over the next 6 months, I prepared carefully. I documented everything. Every insult Adrian made, I recorded on my phone. Every text message from Beatrice criticizing me, I saved. Every family gathering where they excluded or embarrassed me, I quietly photographed and noted. I also researched Adrian's finances. As his wife, I had access to bank statements and investment records. What I found was interesting. Adrian's personal wealth wasn't as impressive as he pretended. Most of his money came from his position at Sterling Properties. He owned some stocks and a small investment portfolio, but nothing substantial. However, during our marriage, we'd purchased 3 properties together. 2 rental buildings and a vacation home. All were in both our names. I also discovered something else. The Sterling estate, the mansion Beatrice was renovating, had a complicated ownership structure. Adrian owned 30%. Beatrice owned 70%. But here's what made it interesting. Adrian had used marital funds, money from our joint accounts, to invest in the renovation. Nearly $200,000. I took detailed notes of every transaction. Wesley helped me quietly retain the best divorce attorney in the state. We prepared papers but didn't file them. We were waiting for something specific. The public humiliation. Meanwhile, I played my role perfectly. I attended family dinners and smiled through Beatrice's criticisms. When she commented that my dress looked cheap, I thanked her for noticing. When Adrian forgot our anniversary, I didn't complain. I could see the confusion in their eyes. They were trying to break me, but I wouldn't break. I just smiled and stayed calm. 3 weeks before the mansion opening, Beatrice called me. "Anne, the opening celebration is invitation only," she said coldly. "I don't believe you'll fit with the other guests." "I understand," I replied sweetly. "You do," she sounded surprised. "Of course, it's your special day. I wouldn't want to cause any discomfort." There was a long pause. "Well, good. I'm glad you understand your place." After hanging up, I called my attorney. "She's taking the bait. They're going to make this as public as possible." "Perfect," she replied. "The more witnesses, the better." I also called Uncle Wesley. "I need a favor for the night of the opening." "Name it," he said. "I need you and Aunt Carolyn there as guests, but don't acknowledge you know me." "Consider it done. Beatrice has been trying to get me to invest in her projects for years. She'll be thrilled I'm attending." Everything was falling into place. The day of the mansion opening arrived. I spent the morning preparing carefully. I bought a beautiful designer dress, elegant but not flashy. I had my hair professionally styled. I looked polished and confident. Adrian left early without saying goodbye. He'd been sleeping in the guest room for 2 months, another sign of what was coming. Before leaving, I tucked a small envelope into my purse. Inside were copies of the prenup clause, financial records, and a letter to be delivered at the right moment. I drove to the Sterling estate alone. The mansion was spectacular. Beatrice had spent millions on the renovation. The circular driveway was lined with luxury cars. Valets in crisp uniforms directed traffic. I handed my keys to a valet and walked toward the entrance. Inside, I could hear music and laughter. The house glowed with warm light. Flowers filled every corner. This was meant to be Beatrice's triumph, her moment of glory. It would be, just not the way she expected. I walked through the massive front doors into the marble foyer. Immediately, I saw Adrian standing with his mother near the grand staircase. They were greeting guests, looking like royalty. Then Adrian saw me. His face went pale, then red with anger. He strode toward me. That's when he said it. "My mother doesn't want you here." The entire foyer went silent. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward us. I saw Beatrice's smile widen. This was exactly what they'd planned. Public rejection, Maximum humiliation. They expected me to run crying from the mansion, too ashamed to ever challenge them. But I'd been preparing for this moment for 6 months. I smiled calmly. Thank you for clarifying that, Adrian. I placed the vintage music box on the entrance table and smoothed my dress. Enjoy your evening, I said pleasantly. Then I walked out with my head held high. Behind me, I heard confused murmuring. That wasn't the reaction they'd expected, but I wasn't worried. Phase 1 was complete. I drove straight to a nearby hotel where I'd rented a suite. My attorney was waiting. It's done, I said. 200 witnesses heard him publicly reject me at his mother's celebration. She smiled. Then let's proceed. I'll file the divorce papers first thing tomorrow morning. The prenup is now void due to Clause 17. Public humiliation terminates its protections. What about the mansion investment? The $200,000 from marital funds gives you a legitimate claim to a portion of the property's value. We'll argue for repayment plus damages. I nodded. And the rental properties? Those are clearly marital assets, 50-50 split minimum. Tomorrow, Adrian would wake up to very different reality. I spent that night reviewing everything one final time. The documentation was thorough. Text messages, recordings, financial records, witness statements from friends who'd seen how Beatrice and Adrian treated me. Most importantly, I had something else, something I discovered just 2 weeks ago. Beatrice's mansion renovation had been partially funded by something questionable. She'd taken a loan from Sterling Properties' corporate accounts, essentially borrowing from her own company. This wasn't necessarily illegal, but it required board approval. I'd found the board meeting minutes. The loan hadn't been properly approved. Uncle Wesley, who owned a small percentage of Sterling Properties stock, had helped me understand the implications. If challenged, Beatrice could face serious problems: misuse of corporate funds, breach of fiduciary duty. I wasn't sure if I'd need this information, but I kept it ready. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. This is Beatrice. Adrian told me what happened. You made a scene at my opening. How dare you embarrass our family? Don't expect anything from the divorce. You signed away your rights. I smiled and saved the text. More evidence of their attitude. I didn't respond, let her think she'd won. The morning would bring surprises. At 8 a.m., my attorney filed the divorce papers. By 9 a.m., Adrian's phone was probably ringing. By 10 a.m., he'd have been served. I spent the morning in my hotel suite, calm and focused. Around 11, my phone started buzzing with calls from Adrian. I let them go to voicemail. Finally, I listened to one message. Anne, what the hell is this? Divorce papers? And you're claiming the prenup is void? You can't do this. Call me back immediately. The panic in his voice was satisfying. Another call came from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Mrs. Sterling, this is Howard Briggs from Briggs and Associates. I'm representing your husband. We need to discuss these divorce papers. The claims you're making are outrageous. Please direct all communication to my attorney, I said calmly, then hung up. Uncle Wesley called next. Anne, I heard something interesting this morning. Beatrice called, practically begging me to invest in a new Sterling Properties project. She sounded desperate. Desperate. She needs cash flow. The mansion renovation cost more than projected. And now, with your divorce claim threatening to expose how she funded it, she's scrambling. Good, I said. That afternoon, I received an email from Adrian's attorney. They were challenging everything. The prenup clause didn't apply. The public statement wasn't humiliation. The property claims were excessive. My attorney responded with a detailed legal brief and a list of witnesses who'd heard Adrian's rejection. Then the real pressure began. By the third day, Adrian was calling constantly. Anne, please, we need to talk. Mother made me say those things, I didn't mean them. I finally answered. Adrian, save it for your attorney. You're being unreasonable. That prenup is legal. Actually, it's not. Clause 17. You might want to read it carefully. This is about money, isn't it? You're just a gold digger like Mother always said. I hung up. Gold digger. The woman who supported his career while enduring years of abuse was a gold digger. That evening, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang at the hotel suite. I opened it cautiously. Beatrice Sterling stood there, perfectly dressed as always, but her expression was strained. "We need to talk," she said. I considered closing the door. Instead, I stepped aside. "Come in." She entered, her eyes scanning the suite with obvious disdain. A hotel, how appropriate. "What do you want, Beatrice?" She sat down without being invited. "This divorce is unnecessary. You're upset about what Adrian said, I understand, but you're taking it too far." Am I? The prenup is legal. You'll lose in court. All you'll accomplish is embarrassing yourself and wasting money on lawyers. I smiled. Is that what you came to say? I came to offer you something, she said. $50,000. Take it, withdraw the divorce claim, and disappear quietly. 50,000. After 5 years of marriage and 200,000 of marital funds invested in her mansion. No, I said simply. Beatrice's face hardened. You're making a mistake. The mistake was staying as long as I did. Adrian doesn't love you. He never did. I convinced him to marry you as an experiment to see if he could manage someone beneath his station. You failed. The cruelty in her voice was stunning. But I'd learned something over the past 6 months. Cruelty from people like Beatrice only has power if you give it power. Are we done? I asked calmly. She stood up, furious. You'll regret this. I'll make sure you get nothing. We'll see. After she left, I called my attorney and told her about the visit and the offer. 50,000, she laughed. They're scared. They know the prenup clause is valid. They're trying to settle cheap before this goes public. What happens next? Discovery. We get access to all financial records. Adrian's accounts, the mansion funding, everything. If they fight us, we'll expose everything in court. Do it. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning brought news. Adrian had filed a counterclaim, arguing that I'd abandoned the marriage and forfeited all rights. My attorney destroyed it in her response. Abandonment requires intent and duration. Your client publicly expelled Mrs. Sterling from a social event. She left due to his humiliation, not abandonment. Then we escalated. We requested full financial discovery, bank records, investment accounts, corporate records from Sterling properties related to the mansion renovation. Adrian's attorneys tried to block it. The mansion is Mrs. Beatrice Sterling's property, not subject to marital asset division. My attorney responded. Mr. Sterling invested $200,000 of marital funds into the renovation. Mrs. Ann Sterling has a legitimate claim to reimbursement and a proportional ownership stake. The judge agreed. Full discovery was ordered. I knew what that meant. Beatrice's questionable corporate loan would come to light. 3 days later, Uncle Wesley called. Anne, something interesting is happening. Several Sterling Properties board members contacted me. They're concerned about the mansion renovation funding. Your divorce discovery request triggered an internal review. And Beatrice did take an unauthorized loan from corporate funds. The board wasn't properly informed. They're not happy. This was better than I'd hoped. That afternoon, I received an email from Adrian. Anne, please, let's settle this privately. I'll agree to split the rental properties fairly. Just drop the mansion claim. Mother can't handle this stress. For the first time, I replied. Adrian, you had 5 years to treat me with respect. You chose humiliation instead. Now you'll face the consequences. My attorney will be in touch. His response came immediately. You've changed. You're vindictive and cold. I smiled. No, I hadn't changed. I'd simply stopped letting them define me. 2 weeks into the divorce proceedings, things accelerated dramatically. The Sterling Properties board called an emergency meeting. Uncle Wesley attended as a minority shareholder. According to him, the meeting was explosive. Board members demanded answers about the mansion loan. Beatrice tried to claim it was a standard corporate advance, but the numbers didn't support that. "She's in trouble," Wesley told me. "The board wants repayment immediately, plus interest. If she can't pay, they're threatening to force a sale of company assets." "Can she pay?" "Not easily. Most of her wealth is tied up in property and stocks. Liquidating quickly would cost her millions in losses." Meanwhile, my divorce discovery revealed something else interesting. Adrian had a secret bank account. Nothing huge, about $80,000, but it was money he'd hidden from me during our marriage. Money he'd claimed didn't exist when I'd asked about savings. My attorney added it to the asset list. Adrian's attorney called, sounding exhausted. "Mrs. Sterling, my client is willing to negotiate. Can we schedule a settlement conference?" "Of course," my attorney replied. "We're open to reasonable discussions." The conference was scheduled for the following week. The night before, I received an unexpected visitor at my hotel suite. It was Adrian. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were red. "Anne, please, I'm begging you." "How did you find me?" I asked. "Does it matter? Anne, please. This has gone too far. Mother is furious. The board is threatening her position at Sterling Properties. My reputation is damaged, all because you're angry about one comment." "One comment?" I stared at him. "Adrian, you publicly rejected me at your mother's celebration, in front of 200 people, after years of letting her treat me like garbage." I know, it was wrong, but please, let's end this. I'll split the rental properties with you, 60-40 in your favor, just drop everything else." "What about the 200,000 in marital funds your mother used?" He looked away. "That's complicated." "No, it's not. It's theft. She took our money to renovate her mansion." "It was an investment. The mansion's value increased." "Then I want my share of that increased value." "That's ridiculous." I moved toward the door. "This conversation is over. Tell your attorney I'll see him tomorrow." Adrian grabbed my arm. "Anne, please. Mother said if you push this, she'll destroy you. She has connections, lawyers. She'll make sure you never work in the city again." I pulled my arm free. "Tell your mother I'm not afraid of her anymore, and if you touch me again, I'll call security." He left, defeated. I locked the door and called my attorney. "They're panicking." "Good," she said. "Tomorrow we go for everything." The settlement conference took place in a downtown law office. On one side sat Adrian, Beatrice, and their 2 attorneys. On my side sat my attorney, myself, and Uncle Wesley, who'd insisted on being there as moral support. Beatrice's face, when she saw Wesley, was priceless. "Wesley Montgomery," she said coldly. "I didn't realize you were involved in this mess." "Family supports family," he replied calmly. The lead attorney, Mr. Howard Briggs, opened the discussion. "Let's be reasonable, people. Mrs. Ann Sterling is entitled to some assets from this marriage. We're prepared to offer the following: 1 rental property valued at approximately $300,000 and $50,000 cash. In exchange, she withdraws all other claims." My attorney didn't hesitate. "That's insulting. My client is entitled to half of all marital assets. That includes both rental properties, the vacation home, half of Mr. Sterling's hidden bank account, and reimbursement for the $200,000 invested in the mansion." "The mansion investment was Mrs. Beatrice Sterling's personal matter," Briggs argued. "Funded by marital assets," my attorney countered. "We have documentation proving the money came from jointly held accounts." Beatrice leaned forward. "This is extortion." "No," my attorney said calmly. "This is divorce law. Your son publicly humiliated my client, voiding the prenup's protections. Now she's entitled to equitable distribution." "The prenup clause is ambiguous," Briggs tried. My attorney pulled out a document. "I have statements from 12 witnesses who heard Mr. Sterling's public rejection. I also have text messages from Mrs. Beatrice Sterling confirming the intentional nature of the humiliation. The clause is not ambiguous. The room went silent. Uncle Wesley spoke for the first time. There's another matter to discuss. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. What matter? The Sterling Properties Board has questions about corporate fund usage, specifically the unauthorized loan for mansion renovations. Her face went pale. That's none of your business. Actually, as a shareholder, it is. The board has requested an independent audit. If irregularities are found, there could be serious consequences. Briggs looked confused. What does this have to do with the divorce? Everything, Wesley continued. If Mrs. Beatrice Sterling faces legal trouble over corporate fund misuse, her ability to pressure this settlement disappears. My niece can wait this out. Can you? I watched Beatrice's expression shift from anger to calculation. She whispered urgently to Briggs. He nodded, then turned to us. Let's take a 30-minute break. My clients need to discuss options. We stepped out into the hallway. That was brilliant, I told Wesley. Just reminding them that they're not as powerful as they think, he replied. My attorney was smiling. They're going to fold. Did you see Beatrice's face when Wesley mentioned the audit? When we returned, the atmosphere had changed. Briggs spoke carefully. My clients are willing to make a more generous offer. Mrs. Ann Sterling receives both rental properties, the vacation home, the entire hidden account, and $150,000 in reimbursement for the mansion investment. In exchange, she signs a non-disclosure agreement about family matters. My attorney looked at me. I nodded. We accept with one modification, she said. What modification? Briggs asked warily. No non-disclosure agreement, my attorney stated firmly. Mrs. Sterling will agree not to proactively discuss the marriage publicly, but she retains the right to defend herself if anyone from the Sterling family makes false statements about her. Beatrice started to protest, but Adrian put his hand on her arm. Fine, Briggs said. We agree. The attorneys spent the next hour drafting the settlement agreement. When it was finished, I read every word carefully before signing. 2 rental properties, the vacation home, $80,000 from Adrian's hidden account, $150,000 in mansion reimbursement. After 5 years of marriage, I was walking away with assets worth approximately $900,000. More importantly, I was walking away with my dignity intact. As we gathered our things to leave, Beatrice stopped me at the door. You think you've won, she said quietly, her voice full of venom. But you're still nobody. You'll always be the girl who wasn't good enough for my son. I looked her directly in the eyes. Beatrice, I spent 5 years trying to be good enough for your family. I finally realized the problem wasn't me. It was you. You're a bitter woman who measures worth by money and status. I'm free of that now. I walked past her without waiting for a response. Outside, Uncle Wesley was waiting by his car. Proud of you, Anne, he said, pulling me into a hug. Thank you for everything. What's next for you? I smiled. I'm going to start living for myself. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I bought a beautiful craftsman-style house in a quiet neighborhood across town. It wasn't as big as the house I'd shared with Adrian, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture I chose, every paint color I selected. No one criticized my choices or made me feel small. I also did something I'd dreamed about for years. I started my own architectural consulting firm. The rental properties provided steady income, allowing me to take only projects I genuinely cared about. Within weeks, I had 3 clients. Within 2 months, I'd hired an assistant. My parents visited often. They'd never liked Adrian but had supported my choice to marry him. Now they were relieved I'd finally escaped. We were worried, my mother admitted over coffee one afternoon. You seemed so unhappy, but whenever we asked, you insisted everything was fine. I was trying to convince myself, I said. I'd invested so much time and energy into that marriage. Admitting it was wrong felt like failure. Leaving took courage, my father said. We're proud of you. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard updates about the Sterlings. Beatrice had been forced to step down from her position as CEO of Sterling Properties. The board had discovered other financial irregularities beyond the mansion loan. She remained a major shareholder, but had no operational authority. Adrian had taken a position at a smaller real estate firm. His reputation had been damaged by the divorce. Apparently, word had spread about how he'd treated me. I felt no satisfaction from their troubles. I simply felt free. 6 months after the divorce, I attended a charity gala for architectural preservation. I almost didn't go. These events reminded me of the painful social gatherings I'd endured with Adrian and Beatrice, but my assistant convinced me it would be good for business. She was right. I met several potential clients and reconnected with colleagues I hadn't seen in years. Then I saw him across the room, Adrian. He was with a woman I didn't recognize. Young, elegant, clearly from wealth. His new girlfriend, I assumed. Our eyes met. He looked uncomfortable. Part of me wanted to leave, but I refused to let him control my actions anymore. I continued my conversation with a museum director about a restoration project. 20 minutes later, Adrian appeared beside me. "Anne," he said awkwardly, "you look well." "Thank you. I heard about your consulting firm. Congratulations." "I appreciate that." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. "Anne," I wanted to say, "I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better." I looked at him, really looked at him. He seemed smaller somehow, less impressive than I'd remembered. "Yes, I did deserve better," I agreed, "but I'm grateful for the experience. It taught me to value myself." "Mother asks about you sometimes," he said. I doubted that. I hope she's doing well. "She's struggling with stepping down from Sterling Properties. It's been hard for her." "I imagine it has been." Another pause. "Well, I should get back," Adrian said. "It was good seeing you." "Take care, Adrian." He walked away and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just peace. A year after the divorce, my consulting firm had grown beyond my expectations. I'd hired 3 full-time architects and expanded into historic preservation work. We'd completed projects on 4 significant buildings, earning recognition from the State Historical Society. The rental properties continued providing stable income, and I'd invested wisely, building financial security I'd never had during my marriage. But more important than financial success was personal growth. I'd started therapy to process the emotional abuse I'd endured. I'd reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. I'd rediscovered hobbies Adrian had dismissed as childish. I took pottery classes. I traveled to Italy for 2 weeks, something I'd always wanted to do but Adrian had claimed was too expensive. My life was full and rich and entirely my own. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. "Mrs. Sterling, this is Carolyn Price. I was a guest at Beatrice Sterling's mansion opening last year. I joined a book club." I remembered the name. She'd been standing near me when Adrian made his announcement. "How can I help you?" I asked. "I'm calling because I recently left my husband. Similar situation to yours. Controlling family, years of emotional abuse. I heard about your divorce settlement and how you stood up for yourself. I wondered if you might be willing to talk." I smiled. "Of course, when would you like to meet?" We met for coffee the following day. Carolyn was 53, elegant, and clearly terrified of the divorce process ahead. I shared my experience honestly. The preparation, the documentation, the importance of good legal representation. "How did you stay so calm?" she asked. "When Adrian said those things at the mansion, you didn't even flinch." "I'd been preparing for months," I explained. "I knew something was coming. When it finally happened, I was ready." "But weren't you afraid?" "Terrified," I admitted. "But I was more afraid of staying, of spending the rest of my life being treated like I didn't matter." Carolyn wiped tears from her eyes. "My husband's family controls everything. His mother, his business, even what I'm allowed to wear. I feel suffocated. Then breathe, I said gently. Take back your air. Over the next several months, I helped Carolyn navigate her divorce. I connected her with my attorney. I supported her through difficult decisions. I reminded her of her worth when she doubted herself. Watching her transformation reminded me of my own journey. Other women reached out too. Friends of friends who'd heard my story. Women trapped in similar situations, looking for hope. I realized I could help them. I started offering free monthly workshops on financial literacy and self-advocacy for women going through difficult life transitions. We covered everything from understanding prenuptial agreements to documenting abuse to building financial independence. The workshops grew quickly. What started with 5 women became 15, then 30. My uncle Wesley helped secure funding to expand the program. We partnered with local women's shelters and legal aid organizations. Helping other women reclaim their lives gave my own experience new meaning. The pain I'd endured hadn't been wasted. It had prepared me to guide others through similar darkness. 2 years after leaving the Sterling mansion, I attended another charity event. This time, I was invited as a keynote speaker. The topic was architecture as empowerment, designing spaces for women's independence. I stood before 300 people and shared my story. Not the bitter details of my marriage, but the broader lesson. How physical spaces reflect power dynamics. How women often inhabit spaces designed by others for others. How creating our own spaces, literal and metaphorical, is an act of reclamation. The audience responded powerfully. Several women approached me afterward, sharing their own stories. One woman said, "I've been living in my husband's house, following his rules for 20 years. Tomorrow, I'm calling an architect. It's time to design my own space." That night, driving home to my craftsman house with its pottery studio and home office, I reflected on how far I'd come. The woman who'd stood in that mansion foyer, holding a wrapped gift while her husband rejected her, felt like a different person. That woman had been afraid, uncertain, desperate for approval. The woman I'd become was confident, independent, unafraid. The difference wasn't just financial security or professional success. The difference was knowing my worth wasn't determined by whether someone else recognized it. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Wesley. "Saw your speech online. Your parents and I are incredibly proud. Dinner this weekend." I smiled and replied, "Absolutely. Family, real family. The people who loved me without conditions." That's what mattered. 3 years after the divorce, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The organizers wanted me to discuss building a successful consulting firm while navigating personal challenges. I prepared carefully, crafting a presentation that balanced professional insights with personal truth. The day of the conference, I arrived early. The venue was impressive, a downtown hotel with elegant conference rooms. As I waited backstage, another speaker introduced herself. "Anne Montgomery, I'm Simone Bradford. I've been following your work. Your workshops have helped dozens of women in my community." We talked for several minutes about the intersection of architecture, independence, and empowerment. When it was my turn to speak, I walked on stage confidently. I looked out at the audience. Hundreds of women, young and old, all seeking inspiration and guidance. I told them my story, the mansion opening, the public humiliation, the decision to fight back strategically rather than emotionally. "The moment that changed everything," I explained, "wasn't when Adrian rejected me. It was 6 months earlier when I decided to stop waiting for approval and start planning for freedom." I talked about documentation, about understanding legal protections, about building financial literacy. But mostly, I talked about self-worth. "You don't need permission to value yourself," I said. "You don't need anyone's approval to design a life that honors who you are." The applause was overwhelming.